fair play. Referendums are extremely rare under our constitution, and even if they are not necessarily constitutionally binding, it would be unthinkable for the UK Parliament to overrule a referendum itself, and I sincerely hope this never happens, and I would always oppose it. I say this to the opposition parties opposite. If you had won the 2011 referendum on our voting system, or the 2014 referendum on Scotland's independence, how would you and your supporters have felt if Parliament had rejected or overturned your result? This is a situation this petition is supporting. It is wrong and it's simply un-British. I'm nearly finished now, thank you. We as politicians reap what we sow. If we ignore and discard the will of the people will quite rightly discard us. So SNP members are particularly keen to overturn the referendum result.
My apologies, Sir Roger. I just want to clarify how we can get on the record that everyone who sits this side of this chamber didn't necessarily agree with the indication of the vote that was given by the honourable member opposite.
Once again, as the honourable gentleman is well aware, that's not a point of order for the chair, but I think he's just achieved his objective. Andrew Jenkins.
Thank you. SNP members are particularly keen to overturn the referendum result. I would suggest to them, be cautious about setting this dangerous precedent. Your sole purpose is independent for Scotland, not something I or for Scotland supports, but nevertheless, imagine this Parliament taking a yes vote and overturning it. It would simply be wrong. We are leaving the EU. That's what the British public voted for, and that is what we must deliver. If we don't, then more is at stake than simply keeping the status quo. We are eroding the trust in our democracy. Thank you.
Tulip Siddiq.
Thank you, Sir Dale. This petition, which has been signed over 100,000 people, states that the government, should the government fail to reach an agreement with the EU by the deadline, then Brexit should be stopped. And after last week's chaos, who can blame them? Now, Tory infighting is usually something I would welcome because it's quite fun to watch blue and blue, but Brexit is an issue that transcends party politics, in my opinion. We have 130 days left until we crash out of the EU, and we are in a situation where we do not know what we're going to do. And in answering this petition, I think it's time we ditched our divisions and looked at the very facts of the situation, because they are indeed very shocking. We have no majority for the Northern Ireland backstop. We have no majority for a deal that makes us the rule taker, and no majority support for a withdrawal agreement that leaves 3 million EU citizens facing unacceptable limbo. At the heart of my petition, I will in a minute, at the heart of my support for this petition is the case of EU nationals. I represent a constituency, Hampstead and Kilburn, that has 22,000 EU nationals living there, and it is in defence of their rights that I rise to speak in this debate. And I'd like to make it clear that these are not people who have the right to vote for me. It's not about politics. It's about the fact that they've lived in the community for years and years, and this is their home. Where we live is their home, and they provide an unquantifiable contribution to our community, to our NHS, to our business, and to our creative sectors. Now, the Prime Minister... OK.
Grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. Does she share the view of the Welsh Government and the Scottish Government that the Prime Minister's comments about queue jumping at the weekend were deeply, deeply offensive and should have no part to play in a civilised debate about the future of our immigration policy?
Yeah. I do agree, and I thank my honourable member for that intervention. I will repeat a few of the words that the Prime Minister has said about the EU nationals living here, and as I repeat, 22,000 EU nationals living in Hampstead and Kilburn. She has repeatedly told the House and repeatedly told the members that even in the case of no deal, EU citizens will have their rights protected. But yet, just to choose one example, if one looks at page 28 of the agreement, Article 15, subsection 3, it states that the right of permanent residence can be lost if family or work obligations means that they have to leave the country for 5 years. And as the 3 million group says, EU citizens living in the UK will soon have to pay to apply to stay in their home, and they will have to undergo systematic criminality checks. And yes.
On that very point, does the honourable member agree with me that it's ridiculous that some children who were born in this country to EU nationals from other parts of the EU who've been here for decades are now having to apply to be British?
I do agree with my honourable friend that this is absolutely ridiculous, but also goes against all our British values of welcoming people. In her CBI speech, which the Prime Minister made, EU migrants are told they will lose their place in the queue for employment opportunities. This is a pivotal point in our history. Do we want to become a Trumpian society where we demonise migrants and don't make them feel welcome? Or do we want to go back to our British values of welcoming people to come into this country, either as refugees or migrants, because of the contribution that they make to our country? And does what the Prime Minister has outlined sound like a protection of existing rights? Actually, my residents in Hampstead and Kilburn don't agree, and I'm just going to illustrate 2 examples out of the 22,000 EU nationals living there. Surrit from Hampstead Town is an EU doctor. In a year, he does 200,000 NHS surgeries. He said that Brexit is a threat to his work in the UK. Having gone through a very difficult childbirth 2 years ago on the NHS, every single doctor and nurse and midwife that treated me was from the EU. There's now been a 96% drop in the number of EU nurses applying to work here in our NHS. Georgia, a Cypriot constituent, has lived here since 2003 in my constituency. She wrote to me about her fears about the new reticence of firms in Canary Wharf to hire EEA citizens. The official Vote Leave statement said on the 1st of June 2016, there will be no change for EU citizens already lawful resident. They will be treated no less favourably than they are at present. And with this no longer clearly being the case, we can add EU citizens' rights to the long list of betrayals that have led to an undeniable shift in public opinion. Now, it's already been mentioned by my honourable friends about the people's vote. A Sky News poll on the 15th of November asked whether voters would support or oppose a referendum, choosing between the draft Brexit deal, no deal, or remain. 55% were in support of a people's vote. In a YouGov poll, 59% of respondents said they now support a people's vote. The change in opinion is clear, and as parliamentarians, we have a duty to act upon this change and act upon a failure to achieve a deal. I'll give way.
Earlier on, the Honourable Lady referred to in her first 2 sentences, referred to the withdrawal agreement. Does the Honourable Lady accept my opinion, and the opinion of unionists, that no unionist can support a plan that gives Brussels more say over trade and rules in Northern Ireland than the UK Parliament? And how can anyone in this House who supports a plan that draws a regulatory border down the Irish Sea support the withdrawal agreement? And does the Honourable Lady feel our angst and our annoyance at what is happening?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and perhaps that's a long list of questions that the Minister could answer, because I'm going to come on to my long list of questions that I have for the Minister. First of all, in his summing spiel, have the promises of vote leave materialised in his opinion? And if not, should the public be given another say on the deal that is reached? Does this draft deal stand a chance of passing the Commons in light of the dissent from across the House that we've seen? And if not, shouldn't the public be given another say on the deal that is reached? Yes.
She's making a very convincing case for how people can change their minds. Does she not remember that 2 years ago the Conservative Party chose a leader, yet some people in that party now want to choose a leader? They don't want that leader set in stone for 2 years, and drawing the same parallel, people have changed their minds. Sure, they should be given the option to see if the will of the people is still the will of the people.
Maybe Andrea wrote that letter, but she won't.
I agree with my honourable friend, and I hope that the leader goes on another holiday so that we have an opportunity to choose yet another leader for the country. But going back to the Minister, does the Minister believe that a no-deal scenario, with all the chaos that it will cause, is a viable path for our country? And if not, shouldn't the public be given a say in the deal that cannot be reached? And it has been clear to me for some time now, and thousands in my constituency, that the government doesn't have the answers. So ultimately, the people should be given the opportunity to vote again. And I just want to... Yes.
It seems to me that given that voters only found out last Wednesday what they apparently voted for in 2016, the only proper democratic course of action now is to put the Prime Minister's proposal to the public by way of a people's vote and see whether they want to accept that or to remain in the EU. Does she agree with that?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and the one thing I would say is when we went into that ballot box in June, in that fateful day, there was only one question on the ballot paper. The only question was, do you want to leave the European Union or not? There was no other questions there. So for all those people arguing about how it did become a proxy vote on immigration, which I agree with, and all the other associations with the vote, there was only one question on the ballot paper, which was not a sensible way to run a referendum, which I didn't agree with in the first place.
Just be well on that point.
Yes, sure.
Historically, in this country, we've only ever had one question on the ballot paper. How easy will it be for such a referendum to include more than one question?
Well, I think history will probably show that we didn't always get it right, and I'm not resistant to change. I'm afraid I'm not resistant to change. And this actually neatly brings me on to my point about the fact that it is because I respect democracy that I think we need a people's vote. I respect people's opinions, and I respect the right to change your mind once the decision has been taken. Democracy in the UK did not begin and end with the referendum in 2016, and it certainly doesn't end after 2 years of shoddy negotiations from the government where we do not know what is going to happen in 130 days. And with the failure of this government to bring home a deal that can command widespread support in the House, it is high time that we trusted the British public as parliamentarians to have their say and vote again.